You're listening to an Airwave Media Podcast.
We passed a milestone recently. It's 20 years of My History Can Beat Up Your Politics. I 20, no joke. We're one of the few podcasts, not the only podcast, there's plenty out there. One of the few podcasts to reach that milestone. What can I say? Thank you for listening. Maybe if you see this milestone as an opportunity to help out, join the Patreon, patreon.com/MHCBUIP, or go to www.myhistorycanbeatupyourpolitics. Maybe it's the moment where you just want to send something out on Reddit or on your own website or on your social media and say, hey, I listened to My History Can Beat Up Your Politics. Do it. It still need help even after 20 years. This has always been a show promoted by listeners because it's esoteric. We talk about the bearded presidents of the 19th century. We talk about history and politics. A lot of people don't want to hear about politics. Some people don't like my politics and they stop listening to the show. I mean, it happens. That's what happens when you talk politics and history. We try to do it well, but it doesn't mean it's for everyone. 2006 is when we started. June 2006, probably had about 50 subscribers immediately, and then it shot up to like 400 by the end of that year, and we're somewhere near 10,000 on a regular basis. It fluctuates. I always feel like I had a little bit before COVID. There was a lot more long commuting going on, and I feel like some of that got knocked. It's a show with long episodes, and then it always helps to have long trips. All sorts of things happen, but you remain, and thank you for listening. Consider the Patreon. Consider speaking out about us. A couple of people I want to thank, professionally, Dan Carlin, his podcast. I wasn't listening to Dan Carlin when I did mine. It's funny because I know we have a similar name, Carlin, whatever, but no real relationship there because I wasn't listening until people pointed it out to me after I was doing my podcast. But I will say, initially in the beginning, Dan Carlin tweeted about us, about My History Can Beat Up Your Politics, recommended it, and we picked up a number of listeners from that. In the beginnings, we were picking up a lot of mutual listeners. Now, I don't talk about the same topics. I talk about more what he talked about on Common Sense when he was doing it, a little more. Haven't talked to Dan probably in a decade or so, but that's okay. The one thing I want people to know about it that isn't apparent on the surface is that Dan, particularly in that period where a lot of podcasts were starting, like me, helped out a lot of other podcasters, appeared on shows that were even of a small audience and things like that. And that's an unknown side of him. Bob Crawford, Ben Sawyer of The Road to Now, thank you very much. I know Bob from Stockton College, and we were both on the radio station. And it's crazy that we've met up again in this podcasting world. Check out Bob Crawford's book on John Quincy Adams. It's great. Check out the Road to Now podcast. Chris Novembrino, thanks. Theme song, that theme song you hear, that's him. That's Chris Novembrino. Also, he comes on the show, always adds a lot when he's on. He will definitely be on again. Richard Bay of The Richard Bay Show, a longtime fan now. Thank you. Simon & Schuster and other publishers, but particularly Simon & Schuster, right around 2017, 2018, really took a liking to the show, and we booked a lot of interviews. We don't really do a lot of interviews now. That's why you haven't heard as many, but many of them came from Simon, who believed in the show and helped to promote the show. So I can't remember the fellow's name there, but good people. Jason, we had a lovely Italian dinner in New York. Thank you. I mean, that is what a great country where you can come to a city and take your podcaster out to dinner. That's a really great thing to do. Others too numerous to mention. That's it. I just have to say. Ben Mathis, Airwave Media Network. If you've got a show, if you've got a podcast of your own and you have some numbers, he's going to want some numbers. Think about contacting Ben over at Airwave. Maybe you can get on the network, get some advertising revenue, and you don't have to do all your advertising booking, which is a lot of work. In advertising selling, that's a lot of work. Quince for their sponsorship, Mack Weldon for their sponsorship in the past, Warby Parker, another one for their sponsorship in the past. Critical to funding the podcast to make it cash positive, which it probably occurred, cash positive nature of the podcast probably occurred about 10 years in. It took a while. Everybody who donated and everybody who joined the Patreon during the period that I wasn't working, and I talked about it on the show. I really appreciated that a lot. Yeah, David Priest, historian, author, former CIA. In the did I get that right? Yeah, former CIA, briefing vice presidents and such. So he added always has had a kind word, some good suggestions, and he's been on several times. He's probably next to Chris Novembrino, our most recurring guest. 20 years. So what do we say about it? We're not the only 20-year one. The Bowery Boys, I think, next year are coming up. Useless Information Podcast next year. Congrats to them. There were a lot of podcasts on. History According to Bob was one that influenced me quite a bit. Obviously Dan Carlin and Mike Duncan were already up during this time. Twit, was one of the originals, This Week in Tech. So there was plenty of podcasts up. I don't think you'll ever match the novelty of what podcasting was in the beginning. It was almost just like this mass. You didn't know what was going to happen. You were putting stuff out there, and you would do these blogs, these blog articles, and you'd have to code them with sound files. That's how it originally worked. There weren't all these programs to do it for you. You would code it, and then the readers, the feed burner and such would pick it up and serve it out as an RSS feed to users who would then read it on their iPod device. That was before smartphones. Then came smartphones. Then came Serial, and the whole thing explodes. That was a blessing and a curse, because I do believe for more independent podcasters like me, the, say, 2013, 2014 moment where podcasts come on smartphones and Serial blows up and gets all this attention. My first podcast, the first episode, was on Bush and the media. And I make no secret about it. I wasn't happy with the Bush administration. So everyone who has saluted me in the past and says, you're so nonpartisan, you're so this, you're so that, I don't really start with any particular promise to be, nonpartisan. It's just who I am, in a way that I try to look at all sides of things as best I can with my own biases, and limits to objectivity that anybody might have. I certainly didn't come into it saying this would be like a totally neutral podcast with no opinion, So I came in as a opponent of the Bush administration, but one that I think could think about a larger context. Like, why am I just getting mad at this president? Maybe I should look at some context and see what's been done in the past. There's history. My history can beat up your politics. Read some book and they said, pick two things. If you're going to do a podcast, pick two things that you like, right? Like Reese's peanut butter cups, like chocolate and peanut, right? Peanut butter, like history, politics. So, we almost called it histropolitics. We almost called it history sandwich. We almost called it like political history podcast and all of that. I don't know. I get the name. The name I think has helped a bit, at least in the beginning. My history can beat up your politics. I do get from time to time, very rare, but you'll get a few people like, well, I don't like violence. Like, I can assure you, dear listeners, I don't like violence either. It's just a name. It's a common phrase, like my history can beat up your politics type thing. So anyway, 20 years. And I talked about that first episode. What I'm doing for 20 years is to come back to that topic. Because what I believe I've discovered is that that was related to Bush and the media. It was specifically about the Judith Miller situation and the idea that there was a manipulation of stories, where in effect, the administration was feeding information from their friendly sources, Iraqi exiles, who maybe a Dick Cheney or someone close had informed, and then using those stories, which they essentially created, to justify weapons of mass destruction and things they wanted to justify with a New York Times banner. Manipulating the media, is it right? And of course, because you want to be a little objective on these things, I look through history and see we're different, I mean, Teddy Roosevelt was inviting reporters in to get the mud off your shoes, come on in. And meanwhile, he's giving them impromptu little press conferences, making sure that his message gets heard. So how much have presidents done all these varying activities? And the reason I bring this up is because we're about to do a series. It's at this point is probably going to be 8 episodes. It keeps growing. Called Our Mediated Republic, which is about media and political power, the intersection between politicians and media, and how throughout American history, while there's been some people who will present things objectively or might be objective about a particular news story, the idea of a total objective media really doesn't hold up to scrutiny. And that goes from the very beginnings to the middle. I like to call it the bearded president middle, to the early 20th century, to the late 20th century, to the early 21st century, to now. There's some type of relationship between media and power, and we're going to get into that. Because what I think I've discovered most importantly over the last 20 years, and it's really becoming important now, as you have a battle for control of various media outlets, as you have social media, people trying to kind of monopolize that, or how can I get my social media to be the one, buying and selling of various medias to change the politics of it. And the interplay of that with media sources becoming kingmakers. And what I've discovered, or what I think is the most compelling thing that I've studied, is that, Lincoln said it, like, he who makes the opinions controls the country. And it's media power, TV, newspapers, radio, throughout history, whether you do it in a friendly way, whether you do it in an angry way, whether you do it in a dictator-like fashion, like buying a newspaper, which, don't be shocked by this, many presidential candidates and several presidents have owned media. And more commonly, if they didn't own it, they have their newspaper that's their favorite. Whether it's like George W. Bush and his USA Today, feeding them special stories. Kennedy in his time, his connections at Time Magazine. Lyndon Johnson, who owned a TV station. So you have Warren Harding, who was a newspaper publisher. Lincoln, who bought a German-American newspaper and had very friendly relationships with editors. We're going to talk about all of this stuff. I think the point is, in a democracy, if you control, ostensibly everything's controlled by popular opinion. But it would be gullible to think that you cannot mold that popular opinion, that you cannot move that popular opinion. And since a lot of elections are determined by not even a majority, you just need maybe a plurality, being able to move even 5% is important. And so control of the media leads to control of government. It seems simple. The rest of it, the media as referees, there's some of that going on. Media as objective people, there's some of that. Media as telling you things that you don't know, it certainly has these functions. But behind it is kind of a game behind the game. That's it. Thanks for listening. Other than this media series, there's no special plans. There's no cake or anything. It's just we keep on working here. Oh, of course. One more thing. You have heard a couple listeners come on. Those are patrons. So every listener that you've heard come on and talk, they're patrons. They're on the Patreon. I started there. But I will put the offer out. If you're interested, I may talk to some listeners. I'm not going to guarantee everyone. Have some story or have a question for me or something like that if you're really interested in coming on, and we'll talk to a few listeners. info@myhistorycanbeatupyourpolitics.com would be the email. Don't expect an answer like the second. I kind of check this email not religiously, but I do check it. And info@myhistorycanbeatupyourpolitics.com. And just, I would say, let me know what you'd like to talk about. It could be a story of history that's interesting to you, We had, our Peter Holohan that talked about bank robberies. It was great. The California bank. Go back and listen to that if you haven't. Or maybe you have a question for me or something. Just expect to talk for, say, 10 minutes. That's all. It's not these aren't long conversations, 10, 15, And go ahead and do that if you are interested. And if you're, someone who's okay with being recorded and coming on My History Can Beat Up Your Politics. That's it. All right. With that, thank you if you're listening now, and I'll leave it there.